Hello and good afternoon and welcome to CFA Society Chicago's University Day and our event, Education to Employment. Thanks to the many students and a few faculty, we guess, who might be joining in on the session today. I'm Vincent, Chief Executive Officer of the Society. I'm a CFA charter holder and worked in our industry in Chicago for Kemper and William Blair. My investment work centered on fixed income or bond portfolio management. I was an analyst and portfolio manager and managed accounts for corporate pension clients and mutual funds. I'm joined today by Melissa Binder. Melissa, can you share with our audience some of your investment career and background?
Yes, thank you. My name is Melissa Binder. I'm a managing director at PPM. I've been a charter holder since 2012 and have worked in the investment management industry for 16 years. Prior to joining PPM America, I started my career in investment consulting where I worked in the research department at Siegel Marco Advisors analyzing investment funds for our clients.
That's great, Melissa, thank you. So today our agenda is 2.5 hours with a couple of breaks in between to give everyone a chance to stretch their legs. Melissa and I are going to discuss the charter, what it is, its value in the career marketplace, and how you earn it. We will also discuss who CFA Society Chicago is, including the benefits of a student membership for our audience. We then have planned an industry panel to go into a little more depth about working and having a career in the investment management industry. We'll end with a global macro portfolio manager who will also discuss his career journey and experiences as CFA and the current market environment. So let's begin on slide 3. Thanks, Melissa. So what is the charter? What is the charter? We think that maybe some of you have friends or family, or maybe an academic professor, someone who worked in the industry that has a charter, and you may have some level of knowledge of it. But if you don't, it's a credential that takes a lot of time and effort and testing to go through, but it provides you expertise and knowledge in investment analysis. It is not an understatement that it has global credibility in the industry. It is widely known. Started some 50, 60 years ago, 1963, has employer recognition. Many of you, if you get into the investment management career after undergraduate school, you'll work at an employer where it's highly valued, it's highly recognized, it's highly encouraged. Certainly, many employers pay for the exam registration, etc., your books, your prep materials, and in some cases, it's widely known as a graduate level in investment management. Most importantly, at the bottom of this slide, the students should take away the idea that it's a high commitment to ethical values and attitudes and actions. That is a fundamental underlining of this credential, that charter holders act with credibility and professionalism and in the best interest of clients at all times. Let's slip ahead to slide 4. So what does the program cover? So it's a 3-part exam, level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 focuses on basic financial and investment knowledge and tools and skills. You should think about what you're learning in undergraduate school or learned in undergraduate school in terms of finance, accounting fundamentals, economics, and some quantitative skills and tools. Tools like statistics and quant ideas. It's multiple choice question test. It's fundamental. A lot of what you're learning now can be used to take that exam, level 1. Level 2 takes you to the next level, so to speak, in that you use those tools to make valuation decisions about investments. So you're cumulative building from level 1 to level 2. Level 3 focuses on taking what you've learned and applied and putting it into a portfolio management context for institutional investors or wealth planning. Level 2 is known as one of the harder exams, but you do get credit as you work through here. Credit in the industry, credit from employers. When you get your email that says you passed level 1, you will update your LinkedIn profile and say, I am a level 2 candidate. I have passed level 1. And by gosh, I got through that first hurdle. I'd note at the bottom of this slide for our audience, level 1 is being offered 4 times next year, excuse me, and level 2 and level 3 twice a year. This is a change. This is a change to computer-based testing by CFA Institute. Let's go ahead, Melissa. Thank you. So how does it work? What's the test? What's the format of the test? So first of all, our students should understand you register with CFA Institute. This is a global exam. The Institute is headquartered in Charlottesville, Virginia. You register with them. The exam is 4.5 hours, as this slide indicates, broken up into a morning and an afternoon session. It's rigorous. You can take the exam while an undergraduate student. This isn't necessarily common practice, but it happens more frequently now than it did in the past. So if you have a graduation date known for your undergraduate degree, you can begin the program, you can register, and you can take level 1. It's a lot of discipline and focus that a student needs. But again, as I said on the earlier slide, level 1 is a lot of accounting, finance, and economics and statistics that you should be very familiar with. I would also note the society support. When you're a candidate, you're in a group of people, you're in a cohort that have elected to take something that is very rigorous and challenge yourself, and something that can be very, very rewarding. So you will have a bunch of camaraderie with other people that are taking it. You can take level 2 and level 3 while you're in graduate school, but for undergraduates, the max you can do is get level 1 out of the way. Okay, excuse me. Let's go ahead, Melissa. So what do you do with it? What do you do once you've passed it and earn your charter? So it's 2 things. You got to pass all 3 levels, then you do have to earn some hours of work experience, which was on the prior slide. But what does a CFA do? A CFA, originally the program was designed to be heavily concentrated or focused in portfolio management or research. Now that still applies, but the exam has changed over time. Just as the curriculum at your universities have changed over time, so has the exam, and so has the application of what you might do. Candidly, I would tell the students, portfolio management and research, there are fewer jobs in that industry, in those verticals, in those actual assignment and job descriptions, because it's a mature industry in many ways here. That would be the challenging news of this. The bright side, or the optimistic side of this, is that the charter is highly valued across the value chain in financial services. It is of value in consulting. And when we say consulting, we mean that the Boeing pension plan or Exelon, Abbott Laboratories, Walgreens, some of the people working at those companies on the pension plan have a CFA, and they hire investment management consulting firms to help them. Risk analysis and risk management, investment strategy, the communication with clients, even the business development. If you're oriented towards sales in the financial services industry, this is a credential that is valued. The knowledge you get is tremendously valued and appreciated. The sectors, we call them asset management. That might mean institutional, meaning working for clients that are large, pension plans, endowments, foundations, 401k plans that employers start. But private wealth, the charter has a lot of credibility and value in private wealth. Commercial banking, some investment banking associates pursue the CFA exam. So there's a wide range of applicability for this. It's valued all across the value chain. People just recognize it as rigor, as discipline, as grit, really gutting it out, I would say to the students. It's hard, but it's very much worth it. Let's go ahead to flip to page 7. And I'm guessing most of the students and most of our audience may have a good appreciation for this. This is from CFA Institute, and it identifies top Chicago firms. So at Northern Trust, as of a year ago, there were 238 CFA charter holders working. Now, as evidence to this slide I just spoke to, they're not all doing the same thing. Some would be working in custody, some would be working in currency, some would be working on private wealth, ultra high net worth clients. Some could be working institutional, managing pension assets, managing mutual funds. Likewise at William Blair. You know, William Blair is where I spent 18 years of my career. And charter holders are on the buy side there in asset management, they're in private wealth, they're on the sell side in banking and equity research. Bank of Montreal, Morningstar, everybody knows Morningstar, $10.5 billion market cap company that started here. Phenomenal success story, a great relationship with our organization. Nuveen, Allstate, you see insurance, Allstate and PPM, insurance, Aon is consulting. This is large firms, but they're smaller firms. They're smaller firms that are involved in this in hiring charter holders too. There's a small data tech company up in Lake Forest. So many avenues where the charter is valued. Okay, I think my last slide is next, Melissa, and then I'll be turning it over to you. So I think the takeaway for our audience today is for every student to recognize and appreciate that CFA Institute is a global network. This test originated in the United States. It was designed here. It was first marketed here. But it has become a global credential. My experience has been to go to conferences to do continuing ed and continue learning. And there's 150 societies worldwide. There's 170,000 charter holders. We're representing CFA Society Chicago, but there's a CFA Society Hong Kong, Singapore. There's one in Germany, the UK, Switzerland, in Latin America. It's a global organization. When you have that credential, you have a global network. If you're oriented towards working somewhere outside the States or want to connect or learn about markets outside the States, you have that capability here. You are part of an elite credential, elite organization, a member that there's no limit to the number of people you can meet and network with, potentially work with in your career. Let me stop there. Yeah, we will take questions, right, Melissa, in the Q&A.
Yeah.
And please, if you have a question for Melissa or I, please put it in the Q&A bucket at the bottom of your screen. Thanks.
Thank you. As Chris already highlighted the companies with the largest number of charter holders in Chicago, I do want to point out that the CFA Society Chicago is responsible for supporting those companies, their charter holders, and many other companies and charter holders within the Chicagoland area. Chris also mentioned that there's 150 plus local societies globally. Chicago is the 6th largest society of those. We have over 5,000 members. And yes, it is true, most of our members, 96% to be exact, are charter holders. There are opportunities for students and candidates to become a member of our society and take advantage of our resources. This includes our more than 100 events per year across educational seminars, speaker luncheon series, women's events, professional development workshops, and of course, social networking opportunities. About a third of our members do manage assets and are concentrated in the investment management industry, but there are many other opportunities to find value across with the CFA charter out within the realm of finance and not just siloed to investment management. Those disciplines include accounting, economics, human resources, and statistics, to name a few. Okay, so you're interested in the financial industry. Why should you join the CFA Society Chicago specifically? On the right side of the page are many valid reasons why you should join our local society. These can all be boiled down to 2 main reasons: knowledge and network. The knowledge you'll gain from our 100 plus events is invaluable and ultimately complements what you are learning in your school. You'll also have access to our full digital library, including podcasts, webcasts, and blogs and such. The second is the network. Everyone knows that as you progress through your career, your network is one of the most important things you can have. By joining the society, not only do you get access to our 5,000 plus members that automatically join your network when you join our society, but you also get their experience and advice as you progress through your career. Here's a quick summary of the different memberships we have to offer people. So many of you will fall under the student category. And so if you're interested in finance or even, have a small interest in the charter, you have no reason not to join the society because it's free for students. And you ultimately get the same benefits as the candidates and affiliates. The big thing is that you don't get the complimentary function tickets, which in this virtual environment right now is not a concern because many of our events are free. And when we do go live with our events, students get to join our events at a discount. So it's free, great. How do you join? It's real easy to join if you want to as a student. All you have to do is prove you're a student and write an essay on ethics in the business economy, and then also agree to our society's code of ethics. Chris mentioned this, that the CFA Institute holds their members to the highest ethical standards. And as you can see, the Chicago Society is no exception to this. For those interested in becoming an analyst, here's a shameless plug for the Institute's Research Challenge. This is a real-world opportunity for students and their peers to be assigned a company, evaluate the company, write a research report, and present their findings to a host of judges. The competition starts at the local level, which would be the Chicago Society, and the winners will compete at the sub-regional, regional, and final global level. This is a great resume builder, and many of the past participants have leveraged this experience to gain valuable jobs and internship opportunities. So highly recommend participating in this if you're even remotely interested in a career in researching companies. For those here that are not students and not members, there is also an opportunity to become a member of the CFA Society Chicago if you are registered for one of the CFA exams. And here's some more information on that as well. This concludes our presentation. But before I open it up to questions, I do want to just highlight that I realized that we did cover a lot of information and it was really fast because we want to include 2 other sessions as part of this event. But if you are interested in learning more about the program, the CFA Institute, so basically the mothership, is hosting an event on April 29th, and I highly suggest you check that out. if you are interested in learning more about participating and taking the CFA exams. So, do we have any questions?
We do. Melissa?
Yes. So is it common for people to have both their CFA and MBA?
You or me?
Do you want to take it?
I have some ideas, but you go first.
Okay. I do have both my CFA and my MBA. About 50% of our members do have their MBA and CFA as well. I find value in the CFA and MBA for many reasons. I think that if you do choose both, you have to be strategic to make sure that you diversify what you're learning. So for your MBA, you're going to get high-level management coursework, and for the CFA is a different curriculum. It's more numbers-based and analytical than what you could get in a traditional MBA, while there is some overlap. So I have found both of them very valuable for very different reasons.
Well, let's go a little further then for the question, and which order did you go in?
Me?
Yes.
I actually started the CFA, and then while I was taking the CFA, I decided to also take the MBA part-time. So there was a point in my career where I was studying for the CFA, taking MBA courses and working full-time. So I think I'm a little different. I think that's a little atypical of a career path, but I found value in one, and I realized that some of my peers were getting their MBA, so I wanted to also start studying for that as well.
Yeah, I would, we're getting a few questions coming in here, so I want to make sure we get to those. I would relay to the students, so I did MBA school first after undergraduate, and then embarked on the CFA program when I moved into a treasury position at a Fortune 100 company, and it was heavily investment oriented. So I did MBA first. Is it common? But Grace had asked, is it common? It is pretty common. I'd say it's a little less common than it was. And I guess what I would share, in addition to what Melissa said, is I believe in the career marketplace. If you are in investment management, I think you get credit for having passed level 1 or level 2, and as opposed to you don't get credit for being halfway through an MBA program at night. Let's put it that way. I think employers look at you, and after you've passed one, they take a good look at you, and that's more valuable than saying I've taken 4 courses at XYZ MBA school. That is what I would share with you. A lot of it is taking some of the risk in your career out by getting both, right? But there are certainly people, and I've seen it more frequently. I'm seeing it more frequently that people might not get an MBA and get the CFA. There's a big difference in cost, and there's a big difference in cost. It can be, depends upon the credential, but the ranking of the business school. But nevertheless, a lot of people have both, and they do it in different orders. Some get one first and the other. There's no right or wrong answer. It's more personal. Okay, we're okay on time, Melissa. What do we got next?
We have a couple more. So what is the percentage of those starting level 1 that finish level 3? And does it matter how many years to finish?
So let me take the second half of that question first. Does it matter how many years to finish? I believe the answer is no. I believe there's not a shot clock. There's not a 30-second shot clock to get the shot off. It's it's a lot of hours of study. You can see it on Twitter. You can see it on LinkedIn. There's all sorts of people. This is a big business of prepping and so forth. But wow, questions are coming in now, fast. Is there a question on how many people finish? A lot of people. I was speaking to someone today on the phone who passed level 1, and he's in the job market, and he couldn't get past level 2. A Level two keeps a lot of people out, quite frankly. So there is an attrition rate for sure.
I think I saw a stat, don't quote me, about 20% of people that start the exam actually, or start the program, complete it.
It's rigorous. We can't emphasize it any more than that, but it demonstrates grit to an employer. Let's put it that way. What should we do next here, Melissa?
A lot of people are asking about investment banking in the charter. Is the charter a good way to get into investment banking industry for someone coming from a non-target undergrad school?
I wouldn't say it's the most direct route, but I wouldn't say it's not applicable either. I mean, I'm highly connected to one of the schools that's on here today, and I see someone with an undergraduate degree, and then he goes to equity sell side and gets a CFA, and then gets back into investment banking. So there's no one best way. It's more applicable to institutional asset management, the buy side, so to speak, or private wealth. But certainly investment banking associates need those skills, and employers recognize it. I worked at an investment bank. William Blair is an investment bank. So I know some of those associates in banking had it or were looking to get it.
I would just like to add, if you're from a non-target school or kind of trying to go into iBanking via an atypical direct route, I would suggest joining the society and taking a look at our directory and seeing who at different investment banks or charter holders and start reaching out to those people. That is how I would leverage my network within the society if there was a career path I wanted to go for. We are running short on time, but maybe one more, Chris. What advice do you have for someone who is mid-career and wants to transition to finance and earn a CFA versus entering the industry right out of school?
Well, it depends on what the mid-career is, right? Depends on where that is, what that is. I mean, you know, the exam, no matter your age and stage, the exam does, as I said earlier, it demonstrates to a potential employer the seriousness and the earnest that a candidate has in proceeding with his career and earning it. I'd like to get one more in here. So
okay.
what's the average time span for someone to complete all three exams? When it was given only once a year, level one was twice, but level 2 and 3 were once a year. It could be 4-ish type years. So many people are successful 1, 2, and 3, and many people are not. They have to retake one. That's the rigor of the exam. So it used to be, there was 1 year where you got held up, so to speak. And then, so it was over 3 years was the average time span. The good news is computer-based testing is here. It's up and working and live. Kudos to the CFA Institute on that. And you can take the exam more than once a year. You have to wait 6 months as indicated. We're at 1:29, and I want to be respectful of a quick break.
Yeah, we're definitely bumping up on time, but I also just want to highlight as you join the CFA Society as a student, the best way to get involved is to take a look at our webpage and see what events you want to attend. Oftentimes there's networking events. I would seek to participate in those. And I'd also take a look to see there's different opportunities to volunteer with the society via our advisory group. So I would take a look at our advisory groups and see if there is a certain type of volunteer opportunity that speaks to you. And I'd reach out to the society and see if you can join some of those meetings. They typically happen every other month for all the groups.
So I've got 1:30, and we're going to go to a quick 5-minute break. We'll be back at 1:35. But for those open questions, please ask the career panel in the next session, or find Melissa or I afterwards. Okay, let's do that. Okay. So we'll go. We'll see you back in 5 minutes. 1:35. Thanks, everyone. Okay, and we are back from break. It's 1:35. For the first session, thanks to the students. Those were great questions. We didn't get to all of them, but the good news is we have an industry and career panel right now that can answer all of your questions, every one of them. You asked Melissa and I the easy ones. I encourage you to ask this panel the hard ones. We are very fortunate today to have Ashley Peckham, a recruiting manager at FactSet, where she leads early career hiring for the Americas region. She has 7 years of campus recruiting experience in the banking and fintech industries, and has spent the past 5 years with FactSet's talent acquisition team, hiring interns and recent college graduates. Let me repeat that, hiring interns and recent college graduates. Over the years, Ashley has become heavily involved in FactSet's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and strategy. It's a very important thing in our industry. She's passionate about working with students and impacting their careers. We're very fortunate to have Ashley here. She comes to us from FactSet and their headquarters out east. But she told me when I was talking to her about FactSet, which is a tremendous company. If you don't know it, I'd encourage you to ask Ashley a question. It's fair game to ask the moderator a question. In 2019, FactSet had 133 employees pass either level 1, 2, or 3. So Ashley, we are very fortunate to have you here today. We appreciate your time. FactSet is an excellent partner to CFA Society Chicago, but also an excellent partner to CFA Institute globally. So thank you and welcome. Welcome to CFA Society Chicago programming.
Thanks, Chris. So as Chris pretty much gave my background, so I'll just give a quick intro to myself, and then I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves as well. So Chris said I've been with FactSet for over 5 years, really just in this early career hiring. Before that, did early career hiring at an investment bank, as well as a cybersecurity firm. But so I'm very passionate about working with students, and it probably stems back to kind of a fun, I guess, prior position I had. So before I got into campus recruiting, I actually worked at a university in residence life. So I worked with a lot of college students. Unfortunately, I was the person that college students met with if they got caught doing something on campus they shouldn't have been doing. But nonetheless, that experience really taught me that I love working with college students. And now at FactSet, I really get to help students find their first job after graduation or find that first internship. So very passionate about the work that FactSet's doing in that space, as well in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. So with that, I will pass it over for Kristen. Do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure, that's great. Hi, I'm Kristen Rowland. I will start with my background. I went to the University of Notre Dame, and I have a degree in economics and French. And I got my MBA at the University of Chicago in accounting, finance, and economics. And I'm also one of those individuals that also did the CFA exam. I currently work at William Blair and Company on the global equity team, and I cover financials. And William Blair, to give you a little background, as Chris mentioned earlier, is an investment bank with expertise in obviously investment banking, asset management, private wealth management, and sales and trading. It was founded in 1935, and it's independent and employee owned, and with over 1,500 employees. Chicago is the global headquarters. We have offices around the world. So how did I get here, I guess is the first question. But I guess, sorry, I don't mean to answer jump ahead, but do you want to?
No, feel free, go ahead. And then everyone can kind of do that all at once.
So I first joined William Blair at the start of my career in private wealth management. So that's where I started. And then after that, nearly every job I had gotten through networking, actually. So I really wanted to get into equity research, and my first job was at Morningstar in that regard. Morningstar is really a great firm, especially for people starting out. I was an equity analyst there, and I covered business services. After that, I was at another great firm, Mesro Financial in Chicago, and I was on a small and micro cap value team. It was a fairly small team. We had about $2 billion under management. And under some unfortunate circumstances. So when you're on a small team, some things to be aware of is that if you have turnover, consultants tend not to like that on the institutional side. So we had lost a lot of assets. And I made the decision to move back to William Blair, which I obviously love. So I joined a private wealth management team, but I kept in touch with some individuals that I had met through CFA Society Chicago. So it is a very powerful network. And because of those relationships that have been developed over a 10-year period, I was able to make the jump to the global equity team on the institutional side. So that's how I got there. And and the CFA definitely helped me. A lot of people on the global team are CFA charter holders. So it's very common, highly respected. And William Blair is a great relationship with the Institute and CFA Society Chicago. And I'm currently the chair of CFA Society Chicago.
Kweku, would you like to go next? Just introduce yourself, your firm, and then how you got where you are.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Kweku Obed. I am a managing director at Marquette Associates. Marquette Associates, the elevator pitch for the firm is we are an independent investment consulting firm. We are just shy of 285 billion in assets under advisement. This is our 35th year in the industry. And with respect to investment consulting, in a nutshell, we work with institutional clients, that can be endowments, foundations, pension funds, defined contribution plans, and it's really around asset allocation, manager selection, and all of that good stuff, the risk management of the investment programs. Some of my colleagues do work on the high net worth or the individual side of the business, but the bulk of Marquette's business is really on the institutional side of things. With respect to education, makes me feel old now because it seemed like just yesterday I was in college, but my undergrad was at Queen Mary College, part of the University of London, and then my master's in economics was at SOAS, which is also part of the University of London. I started out my career in the UK and then moved to the US just shy of 22 years ago. When I moved to the US, it was with a degree in economics, and with that degree in economics, I ventured into finance, which is kind of a close cousin, but not exactly the same thing. Worked my way through various roles, really on the asset management side with one firm, Merrill Lynch Investment Managers, which is now part of BlackRock. And for me, the CFA program was really just that building block and key that I needed within my career. So with a background in economics, you can talk about interest rates, macro policy, all of these concepts that are very pertinent to our industry, but the CFA just spoke a language of commonality, particularly at the earlier stage of my career where I was looking to show my worth on various teams. I started out on the marketing side of the business in asset management, made my way to the credit analysis side of the business, and then finally found my home on the consulting side of the business. Goodness, that would have been around 15 years ago now on the consulting side. On the consulting side, I originally started out with a larger global investment consulting firm, spent 7 years there, and then moved to Marquette about 7.5 years ago. With respect to the CFA, once again, it's just been a very, very helpful, I think passport is probably the right term for me, whether it's with clients, whether it's with peers, whether it's with people that want to learn about the industry. It just gives you that stamp of credibility. And once again, it allows you to kind of speak in a language that's common to the industry. So regardless of where you've been educated, regardless of your background, I think the CFA does a nice job of bringing a level playing field of language and understanding to people in the industry. So that's me in a nutshell. I could talk for hours, but I know we don't have hours, so that's it.
Cool. Thank you. And then last but not least, Leon, would you mind introducing yourself, your firm, and how you got where you are? Leon, you're just on mute.
Hey, sorry about that. I think this tech hack and tech glitch always happens to us. Thanks, Ashley. So basically, on my part, I kind of have a unique career switch into the investment industry. So prior to joining the investment industry, I was working in the consumer lending industry for 9 years, basically at a bank. And later on, after reflecting on the true motivator on my part, so I decided to make a switch move to the investment industry just to do more meaningful work. So currently I'm working at Morningstar, which is a global investment research and investment management firm. And I guess unlike traditional buy-side or sell-side companies, our company, Morningstar, provide independent research, readings, and tools to help both individual investors and also organizations across the whole investing ecosystem to make better and more informed investment decisions to ultimately achieve better results. For my work, I think what's really exciting is that I get to help grow the behavioral marketing and behavioral analytics function at Morningstar. There are two exciting goals of my work. First, we leverage behavioral finance to support better investor decision making, and also to boost AUM of the organization, asset under management for AUM, and also to enhance investor satisfaction. And the second aspect is that we provide behavioral coaching to asset managers and financial advisors to help them better coach their clients so that they can foster more desired client behavior. The reason why I got my current job, I guess it's really a coincidence for me to find this unique opportunity in the investment industry. When I was going through CFA Curriculum, I saw that behavioral finance was a major section at level 3 curriculum, and I could never imagine that there are some dedicated roles in the investment industry just for this area. So for myself, I'm really intrigued by the psychology involved in investment decision making. As I mentioned, this is essentially the behavioral finance section covered in the CFA curriculum. More, in other words, I'm just curious about how and why people make certain investment decisions. And I'm passionate about applying advanced analytics and psychology in human decision making to empower investor success. And that's essentially what I do at work. And I was able to get this role by leveraging my past work experience in the banking industry. And also I was able to make a switch to the investment industry, as I mentioned at the beginning, by going through the CFA curriculum just to gain that basic understanding of core concepts in the investment industry. Yep, that's about it, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have some questions that we would like certain panelists to answer, but before we kind of jump into those, we would all like to know really who's in the audience. So we have a poll that's going to pop up, and it's going to ask you, what year you are. So are you an underclassman, upperclassman, recent grad, or other? So if you could take a second, just do that really quickly so we can kind of get a pulse on who we are speaking with. Okay, I think that was enough time for everyone. All right, so it looks like majority, 51% are upperclassmen, and then followed by underclassmen, a couple of recent grads, and some graduate students. Awesome. And then we have another poll, which is just to kind of gauge, in terms of the CFA. So where you are you already pursuing the designation? Are you interested? Are you not interested? Or are you undecided? So we'll give a few seconds for this poll as well. Okay, I think that was enough time. Let's see what the results are. Okay, so majority are interested, some are signed up, and then a good chunk of you are undecided. Well, hopefully after this panel concludes, those that are undecided will sign up and be ready to go. So like I said, we have some questions that we would like to ask to start off, and then depending on how time is, we'll then open it up to use the Q&A feature, which I know some people have already been putting some questions in as well. So but first, the first question is for Kristen. So why did you choose to study for the CFA? And then how do you feel it's really helped your career progression?
Thanks. So I'm going to go back a little bit, if you don't mind. So I first got interested in the industry because my father was in the industry. And I found investing fascinating. And my dad, as soon as I started working, would have me put money aside and he'd invest it. And I would see that those statements, the money growing, and I was, I just said, I want to learn how to do that. And he would come home and talk about various companies, and I thought it was really interesting. Fast forward to in high school, my dad headed up the CFA administration of the exam in Chicago when it was still very small at John Marshall Law School. So I would help proctor the exam. So I thought to myself, someday I am going to pass this exam and take and pass the exam. So so that's kind of how I got interested in it. And my dad was a charter holder as well, and he he embedded in me the importance of having that and the credibility it gives you in the industry. And it's definitely helped. It not only gives you the credibility and it gives you a global network, and that network is really powerful. And the people I've met through the society, through going to annual conferences where you meet people from around the world, is just invaluable.
And then actually, Kweku, would you also like to answer that question for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the CFA has been, again, it's just been a great passport for me in my career. I would say that, the interest in the CFA, the interest in finance, the interest in economics, that's just something I had from a pretty young age. Growing up in the UK, the education system is a little bit different there, where in the US, I like the education system because you're allowed to find yourself a little bit. You're allowed to discover who you are before you determine what you want to do. For me, during my teens, we had to make a decision on what we were going to study, which would eventually take you to your course of study in college. For me, I always liked markets. I liked the numbers. I grew up, I've been fortunate to grow up in many different countries. So looking at things such as macro policy, currencies, things like that, basically factored into economics being a course of study I wanted to pursue in my teenage years through to college. So long story short, that was a reason behind going into the industry and looking at the world of finance and economics. And then for me, really, again, the CFA was ultimately, it was just something that just leveled the playing field. I remember we would look in awe at the portfolio managers when we were entry-level employees at Merrill Lynch, just like these people were amazing and they had the CFA, and we just aspired to be like those individuals. So really, long story short, I viewed it as a really nice challenge to have in my career, to have the CFA designation. It was a way for natural progression within my career. Every company I've been at has recognized the CFA as really just a mark of putting time and effort and commitment into your career and furthering your knowledge. And yeah, ultimately, it continues to be a very good resource for me. Not the CFA, obviously, I've studied and gotten the designation, but the resources available to charter holders are pretty immense. If you're someone that's really into the physical networking side of things, in a post-COVID or pre-COVID world, there are events you can attend. There's an amazing library online, a ton of white papers, there's the journals, there's such a wealth of information. So regardless of how you learn, how you interact, what you want to take from your knowledge base, or to improve your knowledge base, I should say, the CFA has something for you. And again, I just continue to be thankful that it's a path that I pursued. I'm thankful that I decided to go for the CFA. And I guess one piece of advice, I can't control what anyone does in their life, but I'm thankful I did it before I became a parent. So that's just something for anyone right now, relatively young in their career. Do it now as opposed to waiting later.
Thank you. And then Leon, would you also answer why you chose to study for the CFA and how it's helped your career? Oh, you're on mute again.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley, for the reminder. So I myself is kind of like a slow learner and a reflector. So after spending almost 9 years working in the banking industry, I had a reflection on my career motivation, what truly motivates me, if what I had been working on was making sense or was meaningful to myself or to the society. Then I had this shocking realization to myself that maybe by applying all the powerful consumer psychology knowledge or behavioral finance knowledge we have to encourage consumers to sign up for more credit cards and take on more loans in the banking industry, I was like, maybe essentially I was pushing people more into debt. So after this shocking realization, I was like, wow, I don't think pushing people into more debt is truly motivating to me. Instead, I'd like to help them build up their equity and wealth. So that's why I was trying to get into, I was trying to switch from the consumer lending banking industry to the investment research or investment industry. So that was, then I did some research on, okay, how could I get myself acquainted with fundamental core concepts in the investment industry so that I have the confidence based on knowing what I'm doing. So that's why this is I got introduced to this CFA curriculum, and so I think the benefits of getting through the CFA curriculum is really threefold. So first, get a basic understanding of core concepts important in this investment industry, and also to have the confidence based on knowing what I'm doing, and which is really important to me. Second, I guess by participating in the various educational events hosted by CFA Chicago, and these events are tremendously helpful. And through these events, I was able to further expand my professional network and make meaningful connections to, these meaningful connections really introduced me to various opportunities. I guess this was also echoed by or mentioned by the other two panelists here. And through these events are so meaningful and so helpful. I would also say rewarding as well. So through these events, I was able to know some really wonderful people, and later on become friends of them, such as Gerald at William Blair and Chris. And there will be no way for me to get to know these people if I do not participate in those educational events hosted by CFA Chicago. And I guess the last point I want to make is that I was really even pleased and even surprised that CFA Chicago even offer a great mentoring program, and I got really fantastic mentoring from my mentor through this mentoring program, which really helped me mature faster as I choose to grow my career in the investment industry. So I guess that's really the motivation for me to study for CFA, and some of the benefits I was able to get throughout this whole experience. It's difficult but rewarding.
Thank you. And so I'm actually going to go back to you, Leon, with our next question. So what trends have you seen in the industry as it relates to entry-level roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great question. So I guess I can speak to a lot of, so as I recently made the switch to the investment industry, so some of my experience, hopefully a lot of people can relate to this recent experience I had. So, talking to people in this industry, at the very beginning, I got the impression that, hey, maybe the mainstream career path in this investment industry is to go from a junior investment analyst to a senior investment analyst, and ultimately to become a portfolio manager. But later on, after joining this industry, after gaining more experience in this industry, it seems to me that there are two important trends. First, that there's this important secular trend to go to shift from dominantly active asset management to passive asset management. And that means there'll be less entry-level roles available as a fundamental equity analyst. But the blessing is really that on the other side, there are so many different types of players in the investment ecosystem to create value. And there's a greater variety of roles right now becoming available in the investment industry. And previously, I would never have the opportunity to get to know them. And currently, I know that there's investment product management, investment product development, marketing, sales, client service. And I think the other panelists also mentioned that he was able to make the switch from first holding a marketing role. So I think, yeah, really the first important trend is that right now there are so many different there's a greater variety of roles becoming available in the investment ecosystem. You don't have to start your career in this industry by only getting a fundamental equity analyst role. And so I would say really open your eyes, try different roles as you are young, and really find out which role truly excites you, and in which area you want to spend more time to grow. Second important trend, I think, is really about how to stand out when you are trying to find a job as a fresh graduate, right? So I guess that besides the emphasis on communication skills, being a good team player, and always eager to learn, right nowadays seems like there's even more emphasis on advanced analytic skills and the technical skills, or more specifically, advanced analytic skills related to machine learning, and the technical skills such as Python programming are becoming highly desirable and more attractive to employers across the industry, including the investment sector as well. And I think that the analytic skills and also technical skills, these two skills will really help a candidate truly stand out when they're trying to find their first job in this industry after graduation from school. And reflecting on this trend, I think really interestingly, a new section of machine learning and AI was newly added to CFA Level 2 curriculum. I think that kind of reflected on this trend as well. The reason why I think these two skills are highly emphasized right now is because right now we have more data, including investment firms. So when investment firms are trying to gain a competitive edge by analyzing big data in a more efficient way and effective way to drive unique investment insights, that's why they need these two skills, which would truly help them effectively seek alpha as people look to find entry-level roles in this industry.
Thank you. And Leon, you had a great comment about technical skills becoming much more important, at the entry level area. And I think, people might be thinking, well, I don't know how to code, or I don't know this, or I don't know that. And I always say, even if you don't know something, a company is really also trying to seek, do you want to learn? and can you learn? So don't be so, don't, kind of freak out and say, well, I don't know that. I don't have that skill. There are a lot of great resources, on the internet, obviously, where you can, do like a Code Academy course or anything like that. But also it's about showing that want to learn and that passion to learn. That's also very important. So don't necessarily, get scared that maybe you haven't focused on building your technical skills just yet. So that was a great point. So the next question is for Kweku. So what type of networking do you think is superior for career progression? And I guess, what has worked best for you?
Sure, and that's a great question, just because I think networking, the key thing for networking to work, for lack of a better term, is the authenticity of it. So it's really finding a medium or a form that works for you, where you can be yourself and people get to know you. So with that, I don't think it's necessarily prescriptive in terms of, you follow a formula and that's that formula for success. But I do think that if you are someone that's more outgoing, more into, having the conversations face to face, interacting with folks, that's obviously something that you should pursue. If you're more, I don't want to say behind the scenes, but if you would be more inclined to have your name out there from a research standpoint, speak on panels, do podcasts, things like that, that's also another way to get your name out there. So I think the beauty of this industry is one where you can, again, network in such a way that it benefits you and benefits the audience that you want to reach out to and connect with. So I would just, tell anyone out there not to feel pigeonholed. At some point in the networking game, you still do have to go out there. You still do have to meet people. And I think one of the ways of looking at it is also just in the different stages of your career, right? The different phases of your career. When you're starting out, you're figuring who you are and what you want to do and where you want your career to blossom. So your networking may be a lot more ad hoc in nature. As you kind of climb up in your career, I think there'll be more of a sophistication in how you network. So, words of advice, I would say that the industry, regardless of how you do want to network, whether it's more, again, through research and publications, speaking on panels, or whether it's, networking at events, the industry is relatively closely knit. If you're in asset management, if you're in consulting, there's always that 6 degrees of separation. So just be aware of the fact that, people in this industry know many other people. Do anything that furthers your reputation in a good way from a networking standpoint. When it comes to, avenues to be pursued, again, I think it's just really tailoring what best meets your personality, what best meets your comfort level, and again, the stage you are in your particular career. So some broad information there. I try not to be too prescriptive, just because what's worked for me may not work for the next person. But in terms of what's worked for me, it's been a combination of all of the above. In certain stages of my career, it really was a case of just attending conferences, getting to meet people, networking with fellow people that were either pursuing the CFA or had the CFA designation. As time went on and I figured out truly what I wanted to do in my career, there was more of a concentrated focus on writing research, putting research out there, perhaps speaking on a panel, positioning yourself, for lack of a better term, as a thought leader on something within the industry. So these are all avenues I've been able to pursue.
Thank you. And I think, some great points you made were, being authentic and kind of tailoring your plan to yourself. And I think in this kind of COVID world, a lot of us are depending upon, LinkedIn and any sort of, platform that helps us connect. And I would say from a recruiter perspective with LinkedIn, I think being authentic in your messaging and your, however you choose to reach out is so important. There are a lot of times where I slowly get messages over a couple of days where someone has sent like a blanket message to 20 people at our company, right? And so, that might not be the most authentic or kind of tailored way to go about it. So I think it's really important to keep keep things, true to yourself and not spread yourself too thin, I guess, and make more valuable connections as opposed to, just increasing the number of connections, that number on your LinkedIn. So really great points there. And so the last question that we have kind of, I guess, planned, and then we'll open it up to the audience to kind of chime in, is for you, Kristen. So what skills do you think are most valuable for a recent grad? And then what do you think is a way they can differentiate themselves, within the job market?
So for a recent grad, I think there's a lot of leeway in terms of your skills that you bring to the table. Employers know you're not going to know everything, but I think one of the things that would be appreciated is genuine curiosity and asking a lot of questions. If you have those, I don't know if any of you have taken like R or Python, that is getting increasingly valued. But as someone mentioned earlier, as Leah mentioned, don't let that stop you. At my firm, they have done training in R, and I actually took a class internally at William Blair. I can't say I'm an expert in R, but at least I know how to run scripts and do some basic functions in R. And then I'd say soft skills as well, speaking and writing. If any of you are English majors, obviously writing is very important, especially in research. So that would be very much appreciated. And then just if you're on the client side, I guess dealing with clients and talking to people, communicating your ideas to others. And I think one underappreciated skill that I think they're teaching more in school is just sales in general, because you have to sell ideas. You have to sell yourself, you have to sell ideas. It's just a very important life skill.
Thank you. So we're going to jump over. So I'm going to open kind of the Q&A box. I know some people have already put some questions in, so we'll try and get through as many as we can till we hit our end point. So in terms for the panelists, if there's a question that really strikes you that I say, feel free to jump in. So the first one I think will be different for everyone, and it is, what is the average time span to complete all 3 levels? Which Kweku mentioned, maybe you want to do it earlier on, maybe you don't, right? So it could be different, but does anyone want to kind of shed light on their experience going through all 3 levels?
You want to pick one? Because everyone has a story, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know what? We'll go with you then. Why don't you kind of share your story?
So, I would say for me, when I took the CFA, it was at the point where it was annual, and I don't believe you could do the 18-month thing. I think some people can do it in 18 months, so God bless them. I think that is an overwhelming achievement. There's also the traditional path of once a year, taking each level once a year, and then there's also the path of just doing it until you kind of get it done. I would say for me, I was pretty lucky. The big hurdle, which many say, and I still believe it's true, of level 2, I managed to clear that hurdle the first time I took level 2. That was the year I got engaged, the year my then fiance, my now wife, we were planning our life ahead. And for me, I just said, look, I cannot bring a child into this world until I've got the CFA behind me. So long story short, for me, I just motivated myself to get it done, each level when I could. And the big thing I took away from the exam was, look, people pass the exam. So people always look at the failure rates, or they always look at the success rate, but people pass the exam even when there's a low success rate. So if you can kind of tell yourself that as much as possible, you're going to maximize your chances of being on the right side of the pass-fail equation, that's all you can really do. So that's, that's my philosophical advice on the CFA.
Thank you. And then another question that we got is, what advice do you have for someone who is mid-career and wants to transition to finance and earn a CFA versus entering the industry right out of school? So Leon, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of take a shot at both questions kind of quickly and briefly, because I had that experience. So I would say that maybe I was a little bit lucky because I was in the banking industry, which is kind of still related to the investment industry. But I guess the challenge of preparing for CFA while you are having a full-time job during the daytime, and then of course I didn't count how many hours I spent on the exam, and so, but I was just basically diligently spending some weekday evening times and also weekends to prepare for the CFA exam, and by going through the curriculum. And of course, since my major is psychology, I know that there are some really effective learning pattern or learning practice you can do to boost up your learning effectiveness. So maybe that is helping me a little bit. I didn't feel it was kind of mission impossible. Even it's difficult, but it's not mission impossible. Even when I'm still working, and I was able to pass the exam. But I would say that for people who are trying to switch to the CFA or to switch to the investment industry from a different industry, then really I think getting the CFA is one part, but I think network and get some mentoring and build your network in this industry is almost equally important, especially for people who want to who didn't study finance or economics as your major at school, and you are trying to switch to this industry like I did. I think getting through the CFA and also building meaningful network in this industry are really going to help you.
Can I answer that question too?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say nothing's impossible, and there's various roles within the industry. So I think it would sort of depend. And one thing I would just add is, I don't know what your background is, but I'm sure one thing I would tell you is just try to sell that background as being unique to, maybe you bring, maybe you worked at a biotech company and you have a knowledge base in the biotech industry and you want to do research in that area. That's kind of the background you would bring to the table. So it's about selling your background in a unique way. And I do think doing the CFA would be important, especially for a mid-career move, because you might wonder, like, are you really serious about being in the industry? And that would give you sort of a leg up and also give you a network. Like, assuming you haven't done your MBA, you don't have that network, this would give you a network. And the other thing I would just add is that, some areas of the industry are growing and some are mature, like the asset management industry is fairly mature. And so it's competitive. And so you do want to stand out in some way.
Thanks. And then we had a question that talked about, have you had any applicants going for their CFA? And I would say, as a give a little bit of background. So as a recruiter, I see a lot of different candidates with a lot of different backgrounds, and we do see a lot of undergrads that have started, they've signed up for the CFA level 1 and they're studying because maybe their, senior year, their course load isn't as robust as other years. And I always kind of say, as long as you can handle it, continue to work towards it. So I think, your first job out of college could be a little overwhelming. It's definitely an adjustment. And so balancing that adjustment with putting the time in, studying and preparing could be a bit much. So I think it's a fine balance. You might want to kind of put that on hold, focus on getting your feet under you, within your first job, and then also see what resources that the company may have that actually could help you. So a lot of the times I tell people, we have a lot of great internal resources that can really, get you ready for the CFA and help you study and et cetera. And so, take your time. If you can't do both at the same time, that's totally okay. So that would be kind of my answer to that question. I don't know if any panelists also have any thoughts. Okay, cool. So we had another question come in. Sorry, I'm just kind of scrolling through. So we did mention machine learning a little bit earlier. So someone has asked, how is AI and machine learning applied into the investment management industry? And is the CFA becoming a necessity rather than a competitive advantage? So I guess kind of a two-part question there.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
So I think it's still fairly early in AI and machine learning. I know the team is working on a lot of that. And the idea is it will help us be more efficient in our jobs. So, I don't think it will replace necessarily people, but it'll help us be more efficient. And then in terms of the CFA being a necessity, I would say I would lean more towards it being a necessity because I've seen more roles require it, or not require, but you'll see it more frequently, such as in marketing and client service. So on the distribution side, even because they're talking to clients. I've also seen people in investor relations roles with the CFA, and also I would just note William Blair's CFO, John Zindel, he is a CFA charter holder as well. So you see it in a lot of different areas. And I just definitely think it gives you credibility, and it does give you, it makes you stand out.
Yeah, I think as the industry gets more and more competitive, it's a way just to confirm someone has a, I don't say basic level of knowledge, but a predetermined or packaged level of knowledge. So when it comes to training and some of the comments made earlier about being in front of clients, having a technical base and so on, having the CFA, again, I think it's a real equalizer in this industry. Once you see those three letters after someone's name, you get a sense of the pain that they've probably been through in terms of studying. You get a sense of the grasp of technical concepts, and then just from a client standpoint. So if you are out there selling your services to the outside world, for someone looking to hire an investment professional, it is that stamp of approval, really. The CFA shows that they more than likely know that what they're talking about.
And I think we might have time to squeeze in two more questions. So if we can. So first, I think this one might be a quick one. So we'll start with that. But are there any good books that you would recommend to those in the audience?
You want me to go?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. So there are just a number of books you can read. I think all of us on the panel have probably read a ton of books on various topics within finance. Any book, about Warren Buffett and his style. Intelligent Investor is also a classic. Financial Shenanigans, also a great one. And any of the Michael Lewis books are pretty interesting. If you can get your hands, I believe there's a PDF available online somewhere on Margin of Safety. That's also a classic. It's not in print anymore. Those are just a few ideas.
Yeah, I'd echo that. The Michael Lewis route is pretty good. It's just a way of reading about finance, but in a very normal day-to-day setting. And it just allows you to think in a different way that's less academic and, again, more real world.
And then Leon, anything that you would recommend?
Oh, and just one other one, Professor Demerandum at NYU, he's written a book, he has it on valuation, and he also has a website on, if you Google it, his name.
I guess Kristen and Kweku have read. I would add that, so I would add that if you are interested in the psychology behind behind how the market works and why people are investing into this or making this or that type of investment decision, maybe some of the behavioral finance books will be interesting to you. For example, Nudge, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. Because one thing I found really fascinating is that for example, in the high frequency quantitative trading world, we know that investors in general know that they need to buy low and sell high in order to profit. But when you actually look at the behavior of tons of retail investors, they end up with being buying high and selling low most of the time. And maybe that's why they're losing money to all of these institutional, professional, high frequency traders like Citadel. I don't want to put a spotlight on Citadel, but it's very difficult for a retail trader to beat Citadel, right? So I think that's why a lot of people, I think and also to echo on the previous question, why machine learning will be important is because in some of the investment specific sectors like trading or quantitative investment, machine learning and AI, they are becoming more and more important. There are also funds managed like Renaissance. That's totally done. The whole investment approach is heavily based on quantitative methods. So definitely some of the machine learning AI type of book, and I think there are tons of them out there. You can get some really good ones out there, and also Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, Nudge, and some of the technical analysis books. They're also very good because technical analysis basically is reflecting why people are buying and selling in the market, and it's all propelled by the psychology behind those investment decision making.
Thanks. And I know we just have about 5 minutes left. So I don't know if everyone will get to answer this question, but I think it's great for everyone if they can. Looking back, when you were starting out, what would you do differently? So we'll start with Kristen, and we'll see if we can get everyone in by the end time.
Oh, what would I have done differently? I think there's quite a bit. I still managed to get where I ultimately had wanted to be, but I probably would have pounded on the doors of maybe Morningstar a little bit louder and earlier to get that first equity research role, because I was in private wealth management initially. I guess how it worked out was that I did manage to go part-time University of Chicago while I was in private wealth management, which made it very manageable to handle both working full-time and going to school at night. So that was sort of the blessing in disguise. But, to get to that point earlier, Also, I guess one other thing is working underneath somebody as well, just being an associate. I think when I went into equity research at Morningstar, I definitely wanted to be the person on with my name and published, and that's great, but you really do learn a lot by working with someone who's been in the industry a long time. So I think my younger self was very gung-ho. I want to do this, but you know, there are a lot of smart people, so take advantage of working under someone. Don't get so I guess so eager to be that top position initially, because there's just a lot of learning, you know, that you could possibly do.
And Kweku, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll be pretty quick on this one, and it's a case of I'm still on my journey, still, you know, blessed to be busy with client work, still, you know, discovering new things every day, and ultimately, I probably wouldn't change anything just because it would change where I am today. So I think at the end of everything, maybe my retirement party, I can maybe answer that question a little bit more honestly, but at this point, wouldn't change anything. And that's really just taking all the good and the bad, which has led to where I am right now.
Thanks. And then Leon, looking back, what would you do differently?
Absolutely. So looking back, if I were to be given the chance or opportunity, I would start early. And I think starting early is kind of like important when you try to pursue your dream in whichever area. So start early and become an expert in whatever you are doing, right? And so if I had the opportunity, I would like to get myself exposed to the financial world, to the market earlier, and then read more books with regard to how the market works, and then how investors are making their decisions, and how can we improve the investment performance, you know, how do we improve the performance of the investment decision making we're making. So I guess those are the things I would do a little bit differently, and also try to build my network, trying to be more active, and then expand my network in the area I'm truly passionate about, which is investment management. But you see, it took me 9 years to finally realize what truly motivates me. I hope I'm one of the kind of negative examples here, and so when people learn from my bloody experience, and then maybe you could do much better and way better than I do. So hopefully my experience could inspire some people to take action quicker and start to pursue your true dream earlier.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. We're coming up. We've got just 2 minutes left before the panel ends, so I think we'll stop there. I know there's a break coming up before the next session, but thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kweku. Thank you, Leon, for answering these questions and kind of providing your career advice. And I think people have really come away with some valuable insights, and hopefully that undecided number is going up, right? So if we could bring that poll back up, how many people would move from undecided to pursuing the designation? So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What a great job, panel. Thank you, Ashley, for navigating that, and Kweku, Leon, Kristen. Kristen, I know that impatience that you're young and you want to, God, that's how I would have answered that. But phenomenal panel. Thank you all for taking the time and insights. I took a lot of notes, and I guess I'm gonna go with Kweku on this one. Level playing field and an equalizer. The CFA charter it creates a level playing field. If you think you may not be where you need to be or want to be, you can get there. And the charter does that. Leon used the word confidence, the core knowledge and confidence. And the language, Kweku's the language, you speak the language, you're part of the ecosystem. Great job, panel. Really, thank you so much. for spending time with our students. Excellent job. Great questions from the students. We're going to go to break. I've got 2:34. We're going to start right back up at 2:40, please. Please get back at 2:40. See you in a few. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's 2:40, and we're back from break. This is our closing speaker, and in many ways, in the investment industry and the CFA community, he needs no introduction. I'm exceptionally pleased to introduce Mr. Brian Singer. Brian is a partner and head of the Dynamic Asset Allocation Strategies team at William Blair Investment Management. I often get to work with Brian and moderate some of his speaking assignments as we volunteer together for CFA Institute. They usually give me a long intro, which he doesn't necessarily like. Let me just say Brian has been and is a fiduciary on billions of dollars of client assets. He is an extremely serious and experienced student of markets, currencies, asset classes, and all related fields. He is an author with his works published in serious financial publications. He was the chair of CFA Institute's Global Board of Governors, and he won the Lifetime Achievement Award for service to CFA Society Chicago. For those keeping score, he did his undergraduate work at Northwestern University and his MBA in International Finance at the University of Chicago. Actually, I could have just used his LinkedIn profile and said, libertarian, free market, global investment enthusiast. Brian, without further ado, it is great to see you. Thanks for being with us this afternoon, and the stage is yours.
Helps if I uncover my camera at the same time. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I really am pleased to have the opportunity to hopefully give you some thoughts and some ideas that might help you in your careers. I guess at this point in my life would say, unfortunately, I have many years under my belt, and I'd like to have some of those back again to start all over, but I can't argue with the ride at all. What I'll do is talk a little bit about the relationship that I have had with the CFA Institute, because it has been absolutely critical to my career and even my success in the industry. Then I'll speak a little bit about the industry itself today, the things that were valued when I got into the industry and the things that seem to be valued now and will likely be valued in the future. And then lastly, and hopefully I'm really happy to take any questions you may have. And just to forewarn you, don't ask me a question unless you really, really, really want the honest answer, because that's what I'll give you. Anyway, so if I start back early on, my career started on a relatively kind of, I'll say, rough note. As a friend of mine said, after about 10 years of working, I was the only person that he could calculate a mean and standard deviation for the number of jobs I'd had in a year. It seemed that every single company I worked for got bought out within a few months, and that ended up having me doing a lot of things. But that was also good. I was able to experience a lot of things very early on in my career. And that helped me decide the things that I ultimately wanted to do in my career. And back in 1990, a couple very important things happened. Right around the same time, I decided that I would consider this thing called the CFA Exam. And I didn't really know much about it. I had been in the industry for about 9 years at that point. And I wanted to find out about the industry, but the exam back then, really there weren't that many people in the world who had taken it yet. But it was really beginning to grow. And I decided to take it because I decided that I could continue to learn more than what I had learned as an undergraduate and a graduate, and learn more that was more precisely related to what I really wanted to do in the industry. Second thing that happened was an individual named Gary Vincent called me up and asked me if I would join him at his new firm, Brinson Partners, back in 1990. I did that and I never looked back. I was lucky, however, that I also became actively involved in the CFA Institute at about the same time I got my designation. I received my designation. And I got involved by actually, in an odd way, by writing something and having some individuals, Dwight Churchill, you may know, and a couple others asked me to step in and write something for the Research Foundation. Many of you may not know of the Research Foundation, but the CFA Institute has a research foundation, and it supports research that tends to have longer shelf lives than a lot of the other periodicals and things that you might read in the industry. Not textbooks, but practitioner oriented. I wrote something for that and then immediately got involved in the curriculum committee. So designing the curriculum for CFAs as they go through and study for each of the exams. An interesting aspect of doing that is in the industry, I got invited to a lot of finals pitches, and oddly, at a young age, people would ask that I be the one presenting at this finals pitch for clients. And I'd go in, and often in a finals pitch, you'll find 6, 7, 8 people listening to you, but on too frequent occasion, I found I'd go in and there'd be 20 people or so sitting there. We'd do the finals pitch, and then at the end of it, it would be opened up for questions, and people would then ask me what's on the exam. So it was, I guess, at that point, a way to kind of get a sense of what we were putting into the curriculum. Of course, I didn't tell them, but that worked its way into it. And I'd always been involved. I always enjoyed working with the CFA Institute. I ultimately became a board member on the Research Foundation and then chair of the Research Foundation before ultimately going on to the CFA Institute Board of Governors, which was one of the most valuable experiences of my career and one of the most enjoyable things I can say that I've done in my career. It is a group of people that are among the best in the world. They have high integrity, they have intelligence, they're trained in the industry, they have experience, and they have diversity of perspective because they're all from all around the world. And that was really a lovely, wonderful thing to happen. That was something that was very, very important to me. I'm still involved. I hope I will be involved the day I die. I really do enjoy the people. I enjoy contributing to the benefit of younger people coming into the industry. And I really do want to be an active supporter of that. From your perspective, you can do that in a number of ways. One is at the society level. For example, the CFA Society Chicago, but there are obviously many around the world that you can join and change if you move and join other societies, as I have done living in other countries, for example, or alternatively working in association with the Global CFA Institute and working as a volunteer. And the CFA Institute relies on volunteers, and they're very important, very valuable, and we love people stepping in and asking to be involved. It's just a fantastic thing to do. And again, it's just so much fun doing all of that I think you'll really, really, really enjoy it. As we look then over the course of my career and think of what I've learned and how the market is today, when I first got into the industry, the teaching and I would say actually the competence of investors was low compared to what exists today. Not the intelligence, and the intelligence was there, but we learn more and more and more and more every single year. There's more research, there's more thought, and the industry just keeps progressing along the way. And I could actually, as a global macro investor, which at the time was somewhat unique. There weren't that many of us around back then. I could take the knowledge of the CFA Institute, think of the world in a macro perspective and value markets. I could value the S&P just like an analyst, a stock analyst might analyze an individual company. I could analyze the German DAX or the global energy sector. All of those things can be considered in the same manner that the CFA Institute would teach about an individual security. Similarly, for sovereign bonds around the world, bond indices, and importantly, currencies around the world. Back then, though, I would say it was not just necessary to know those things, but it was sufficient to know those things. I could really sharpen my pencil a little bit sharper than the next guy or the next gal, and by doing so, actually have an edge as an investor. Well, now instead of just a few people being trained to do that, the CFA now has trained a couple 100,000 people to do that. And it's hard for any one of those investors to sharpen their pencil sharper than all of the others, because everybody's trying to have the sharpest pencil. And I would say that what is taught is beyond a doubt necessary. And I would say the CFA Institute and the exam process, as painful as it can be, except for the 3 days that you find out you've actually passed, those are 3 very good days. But the rest of it is a lot of work and a lot of very, very valuable work. And most importantly, as I said, necessary work. It's just really, really important to have that foundation. So it's necessary. I'm not sure it's sufficient today. And sufficiency really comes from absorbing a lot of other things that are going on in the industry. Knowledge is being created and absorbed at an accelerating pace. And that makes the industry in some ways more difficult. But it does actually provide an opportunity as you do begin to try to explore these new frontiers of investing. We learn modern portfolio theory. That's great, but we have to realize modern portfolio theory has its roots over a half a century ago. And not many theories really can last that long without coming under challenge or under threat. And I think we are in an environment now where some of it is coming under challenge and coming under threat. And that's important. So how, in fact, do we navigate something like that? First, I would say network is important. What you learn and how you learn it often relates to the people you associate with. And I would observe that aligning yourself, associating yourself with other people in the industry with whom you respect, you trust, and you can learn from and you can teach them, it's always a two-way street, is very, very, very valuable. And returning a little bit to where I started, that's what's so valuable about the CFA Institute. It introduces you to those individuals with whom you can continue to advance your knowledge, advance your understanding as you slowly gain wisdom in the industry. And that is something that you'll never, ever, ever regret. The industry's changing though. So we can learn about valuation. We can learn about risk management, but let's take a step back and think about some of the barriers that are in front of us and what those barriers mean for our careers and our knowledge. The first really, I think, important one is the advance of computing power and data in the industry. And that has done something, not just in finance, but it's done something in economics. And it's pushed both industries, if you want to separate them, they don't need to be separated, but both fields of study very much toward empirical analysis, empirical induction. And that's good, but often that is at odds with what we learn in modern portfolio theory. Modern portfolio theory, when you think about Markowitz or Sharp, Lentner, all of those really operated in a framework of a single period. These are all single period models. and you think about what the expected returns are and over the single period that you're looking at. When you think about risk, you're thinking about the endpoint wealth risk and how those are related across your various investment alternatives. Okay, great. And now, along the way, every quarter, sometimes every day, you get a call from your client asking, what have you done for me lately? And what's happening is that path is becoming much, much more important. It used to be the case that the world was relatively stable. Mutually assured destruction of the Cold War was actually very, very stable. Growth was quite robust among developed countries with the baby boom and with advancing liberalization of policies, liberalization used in the sense of free market policies. But now that's changing. It's not the Cold War anymore. We're in a geopolitically unstable world now. And we are in an environment where the baby boom contribution to growth has passed. And the analysis tools that we need really must consider not just endpoint to endpoint, but the path that we take to get there. So path matters. And that has become really one of the most difficult aspects of our industry, and it is changing our industry. The fact that path matters means that investment horizons are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And knowing what something is worth, knowing its intrinsic value is important. And knowing or having some understanding of how price might get to that intrinsic value is becoming even more important. The path, the volatility associated over the period of time where that wealth is ultimately being realized. And in doing so, it means that careers are now tilting toward a different set of skills. One set of skills was referred to in the prior session, and coding, programming was an important one. The ability to actually work with programming languages like Python or R or MATLAB. My team tends to use MATLAB. A lot of teams use R. Those are very, very important things to use when you're studying time series information. eViews is another very good econometric package designed for time series, just like what we do. It doesn't matter which of those you're using, but I think it's important to have proficiency. And Excel, while it does an amazing amount of things, doesn't really provide you with the tools required to be a good analyst. It gets you to the point of being an analyst, but not necessarily a good analyst. And I think you have to go beyond that. And that's where the ability to program and things like Python, R, MATLAB, etc. are important. The next thing is that machine learning and big data are coming online with tremendous force. And maybe they're not best used for predicting, maybe they're best used for detecting. But at the same time, they are opening up our investment processes, ours being the industry's investment processes, to more knowledge. The ability to take all the infinite facts that are out there in the world, some relevant, sift through those to decide which ones of those you can use in your mental model to understand the world. And that becomes the information that you work with. The access to that information is orders of magnitude beyond what it was just a few years ago, and definitely since the beginning of my career when I started out with an Apple IIe computer and a floppy disk, and that was as good as it got. A lot's changed, and these are areas of expertise that I don't think everyone should go out and study, but I think everyone should have sufficient awareness to be able to understand what can be done with these things, how they can be used in the industry, and how one person's skills might be able to leverage, advance, complement those other skills. So these are all things that are becoming important, and realize that I kind of presented you with a little bit of a conundrum, maybe is a better word for it, by saying the industry has migrated toward a lot of empirical analysis at the same, and I think that's good, but it's not sufficient. I think we've lost the ability to think deductively, to think outside of existing frameworks. We create existing frameworks to understand how the world works, and then we run around crunching data to make sure that's correct or reject the frameworks that we think we have. But that doesn't really help us too much in creating new frameworks that occur from a different perspective. And that's valuable as well. So I have presented that dichotomy by saying, yes, well, we've maybe gone a little bit too far down the empirical route, but at the same time saying, I think it's a skill that you must be able to accommodate with your experience. And it really is. We've gone a long way, and we'll continue to use everything that we've learned in all of the empirical inductive work, that empirical induction that we've done over the past decades. That will stay with us. It will stay with us as a valuable source of information and analysis. And we need to do other things. Other things begin to include more empirical analysis like machine learning and big data analysis, but also deductive reasoning. And it's unfortunate that when we think about the world, deductive reasoning is not something that is used, and more importantly, not something that is taught in the world today. Generally speaking, as you go through school, my kids have graduated university. One's in grad school, the other is working. And one of the struggles that they had was that they were being told what to think. I would say they were indoctrinated in an accepted way of thinking, rather than being presented with alternative views and being taught how to reason. It is very hard for me to hire people who actually know how to reason as opposed to know how to regurgitate. And that ability to reason is so important. And I'll come back actually to something from the last session. And it was a question of what books do people read? And I'm happy to, I often ask that question, oddly enough, and I do keep a list. I keep a top 10 list, and because that's not enough, I keep what I call my runner-up 10 list. But those are the things that allow us, I have in mind, that have taught me how to think. They've critically influenced my ability to reason. They've allowed me to focus on what I think are valuable areas of interest and of current relevance. One of the things I'm learning now is, or at the very early stages of learning, even being 60 years old, reinforcement learning, an aspect of machine learning. Do I think I'm going to be in any form or fashion doing that in my career? No. Do I think in any form or fashion I will need to understand what it can do in my career and how it complements what I already have together? Absolutely. The book list, though, begins to include things like that, reading that. Game theory, learning about game theory to understand strategic geopolitical negotiations. Understanding the creation of wealth. What is the origin of wealth? That's another book, The Origin of Wealth. As we have the East growing in power, Eastern civilization around the Sinic culture, around China, and Western civilization. One of a couple books, actually two, I think, that are very important. One is The Western Intellectual Tradition by Bronowski and Meslish. And that's one of my favorites. Oddly enough, I'm at my parents' house down in Tennessee right now. My dad gave that to me to read when I was, I don't know, high school, college, early college. I read it, didn't really understand it. Read it again about 15 years or so ago and made it into my top 10 list, which was quite valuable. Another one that is important is The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington. And that is about remaking of the world order to understand what happens as Western civilization post-World War II begins to kind of shift to accommodate the growing cynic culture. And last, I would say, might be The Collapse of Complex Societies by Tainter. That is really important as you see these civilizations grow and shrink and accommodate each other, and the complexity of the world that we live in today. These are all things that you're not indoctrinated with in school, or if you are, you're not indoctrinated in a way that's going to probably help you that much. But these are the things you want to keep exploring. Get yourself in a book club or multiple book clubs so that you can read these things, so that you can challenge the way you think. You can ask yourself if what you're thinking is correct. Why do you know what you're thinking, or why do you think what you know is actually correct? But unfortunately, those things aren't really taught that much, so it's hard to bring that on board. What else is happening in the industry? Well, with the complexity of our industry have come innumerable regulations, and these regulations create barriers to entry. And what that means is that it becomes more and more viable for larger firms to survive and for smaller firms not to survive. And you end up with an industry that is being squeezed. And it's being squeezed, the middle is being hollowed out. And the middle is being hollowed out to larger firms that can absorb those fixed costs and at the same time advance superior research, analysis, and ultimately make better investment decisions as fiduciaries or provide solutions to clients. At the other end of the spectrum are the smaller firms, the niche firms. They may have a specific niche in venture capital in the private space. They may have a specific niche in managing volatility, or whatever the case may be. At the smaller end, those will be valued, I think. The middle ultimately being hollowed out. It doesn't have a place, being somewhere between a boutique and a truly global player. That's a really, really, really tough environment. But it does maybe give you some thoughts about where you best fit in the industry, what you may like to pursue, where your comfort may be in all of that. Another thing that's happening is that the industry is shifting from active management to much more passive management. I would first caution carrying that too far. I've seen that pendulum swing back and forth on numerous occasions. And ultimately, there's active management, and then for whatever reason, the styles of active management that are in place don't tend to do that well. For example, in a world like we have today, learning intrinsic value for assets is important, but is it enough? Well, not when central banks are setting asset prices. It doesn't really matter what intrinsic value is for an extended period of time. Intrinsic value will always be there, but at the same time, there will be many other influences that have to be accommodated as investment professionals to understand the path that security prices may take to get to those intrinsic values. So this shift is happening. I don't think it's necessarily over, because I think public policy is going to tend to be overwhelmingly influential in asset prices for a number of years to come, but it won't last forever. And the pendulum will swing back, and passive will become something that will come under question again, and portfolios will shift the other direction. By example, in the late 80s, Japan was the rising sun, and it became a larger and larger portion. Its equity market became a larger and larger portion of global equity indices, and people struggled I don't remember what the percentages were, but Japan was 30, 40, 50% maybe in some instances of some of these indices. It was nonsensical. And generally speaking, investors knew it was nonsensical, but if they invested passively, it meant they owned a very large amount of nonsensically priced assets. And the industry decided, well, we need to do something else. And one of the great ideas of the time was, GDP weighted indices rather than market cap weighted indices. And that was useful for a little bit till Japan's market collapsed, prices in their assets collapsed, and suddenly that was not an issue anymore. And GDP weighted indexes were forgotten. And here we are back today in a world where market cap indices are important. But we've now, again, kind of adopted that. We're getting very, very extreme in that regard. The question is, will it last? So if you think about going forward, there are a number of things I would keep in mind. One, size of companies involved. I think the middle portion of that's being hollowed out. Yes, we're shifting much toward passive. I don't think that's over, but I don't think by any stretch of the imagination active management is dead. It is the basis of society, entrepreneurship, the creation of wealth through innovation and ideas. That's active management. What an innovator does is allocate resources to an idea that he or she thinks is going to be valuable. That's exactly what you do. It's just not to an individual company. It might be allocating to a country such as Malaysia, but you're still allocating resources where you think those resources will be most productively used and rewarded. So that active element of investing is always and always will be a portion of investing that you want to be aware of. There'll be niche opportunities out there. I think increasingly there'll be niche opportunities out there as the computing power, processing power, and data for analysis enable small groups of people to have a large intangible asset base for investing. They'll create tools, algorithms, et cetera, that can do things from an investment perspective, but it won't require lots and lots of people to necessarily do that. Then I would also observe, as I did, thinking about not just accepting everything that you're taught, learn how to reason, doubt everything you're taught, try to question it, try to expand upon it, try to think of the world differently, because that's where investment ideas come from. And then lastly, in the world of coding, it's probably a good thing to know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but at the same time, I think it's something you should at a minimum be aware of as you go out in the industry today. In so doing, I would observe, I think that the best support group for all of this is the CFA Institute and the local societies. They can bring you the resources you need, the relationships that are valuable, the networks, the ability to understand and question with other smart people, classes on Python, classes on R. All of these things that we've talked about are very, very important. The last thing I'd say is get involved. It's a volunteer organization. It wants volunteers. CFA Institute Global wants volunteers. The societies want volunteers. Become a volunteer, become an active contributor, and in so doing, you will be an individual who actively absorbs as well as contributes. With that, I will stop, and I would love to entertain as many questions as possible. But I will ask Chris, if you don't mind. I know the questions are kind of popping up, difficult for me to look at, so if you can take a look and read them to me, I'd appreciate. Muted.
Unmute. You got me?
Yeah.
We good? Okay. So nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Great comments, right? I was like I always am when we are together. I'm taking notes. I'm learning, right? I'm appreciating it. I kind of thought, let me see if I can translate. So we do have somewhat of a proverbial question here that the panel addressed. I haven't answered it yet, but if you could do anything over in your career, what would it be?
Well, I can tell you the worst things I've done in my career, but I would never change. I would say about 15 years ago, I really set my career back massively, because I stepped away from a situation that I felt was unethical, and I didn't want to be associated with it. And in so doing, I had to step out of the industry and then step back in some sense, maybe from the beginning. I would never, ever, ever change that decision. It's an important thing to remember, but it's sometimes a price to be paid. What would I do differently? I would have more aggressively pursued early on in my career diversity of knowledge. I was in some sense just lucky that I kept changing jobs early in my career, and by doing so, I got a diversity of knowledge. When that stopped, there was a period of time where I would say I stagnated, and then I ultimately joined Brinson Partners, and which ultimately became Swiss Bank UBS, and that was 18 years of wonderful learning. And I think that's really the only thing I would have done more aggressively. And I try to create that environment for my team. I do something called critical thinking advocacy, where I ask them to read a number of books every single year. I don't want them reading the newspaper. I don't want them reading broker reports. I want them to learn how to reason, how to think, and ask them to go out and read things like game theory or understanding Russian oligarchs if you're investing, or any number of things that might give you a different perspective on the world. That don't ever let your curiosity die. Don't ever let your curiosity wane. Keep that going. I let it pause for a few years. If I had it all to do over again, I'd been more aggressive from day one.
Thanks for sharing that, Brian. There's some questions coming in, but I did want to elaborate on one thing you said, and that was you re-engineered networking. We kept emphasizing networking earlier in the program today, this afternoon. But what you said was what you learn and how you learn is the people with whom you are associating. So it's the networking effect of learning is important. So who you associate with, CFA Institute, CFA Society Chicago, is an opportunity to learn. We learn from books and Google searching things, but we're going to learn from talking to other people, right? Debating other people, right? That's fascinating. Let me go back. I've got my own questions, but we're going to get to students first. I'm pleased. We have a question, Brian. Who was your mentor or role model investor? But let me start first. Could we characterize for our student audience that you are more in the value? Use the word intrinsic value, price of an asset versus intrinsic value. Do you describe yourself as within the global macro framework? But do you describe yourself as more value? That price deviates from value, and you're going to maximize returns or outperform a benchmark or deliver superior client results because price deviates from value, and that's a value investment philosophy.
Yes, absolutely. I do definitely lean toward the perspective of intrinsic value. my education was very, very quantitative. My early working career was in derivative securities and bond arbitrage. So clearly it was very, very mathematically oriented. It was shorter term in nature. I just felt more comfortable thinking longer term. And that's ultimately what led me toward the buy side of the industry as an investor, and led me more toward intrinsic value. And it was very good in the beginning. Like I said, you knew what intrinsic value, that was necessary and sufficient. I think that as you get older, what you find out is you gain wisdom, but it's young people who bring knowledge. And I've gotten to the point now where I can hopefully provide wisdom, but I rely very heavily on young people to bring their new educations and their experiences and understanding and bring knowledge to the table. So yeah, that's what I am. It doesn't mean that I don't want to do anything else. It means I do very much have to rely on others to bring that to the table.
That's a fascinating answer. So if value is a little your stripe or flavor, was there a mentor or role model investor? Would it be Gary? Would it be Gary Brinson or?
There were two people. One individual was an individual called, his name was Dennis Karnosky. Some people will know him, most people won't. He didn't have a CFA. He did have a PhD in economics from Duke, but not a CFA. And he worked for the St. Louis Fed for a number of years, and he knew how to research. He knew how to do an analysis. And he always would say, if you walked into his office with some research, he would hit you with two questions. How do you know, and why do I care? And that was the hurdle that you hit. And he was ruthless. He was ruthless, wonderfully ruthless in terms of the approach to analysis. And people just don't understand how to do analysis. They're not taught that anymore. Again, they're taught what to think, not how to think. They're not taught how to reason, how to go through all that analysis. He was unbelievable. And the two of us working together for 2 decades, ultimately the two of us ended up at Brinson Partners. And that became the most wonderful experience, because at that point I had 2 mentors. One was Gary Brinson and the other was Dennis Karnosky. And Gary Brinson and I used to love on occasion going in on weekends and doing nothing but argue with each other. And there were so many great ideas that came out of that. I would just go in every single weekend. We'd sit there and argue and debate and do things like that. And I still consider both of them mentors at this point, even in my life. They live point and center in my brain.
That's awesome. For those students, Gary Brinson obviously founded a firm here and was very successful. And Brian and Gary was chairman of the board of governors of CFA Institute. And Brian followed in his footprints. But there's a gentleman also there, Dennis Karnosky with a K, and you can probably look him up, is another person. And arguing and debating, this is the essence of active management, right, and ideas. So let's try and get a few others in here. Brian, here's a question that is right up your alley. Now we're at 3:23, and I got a couple questions. We're good on time, but I know that you could take us deep on this one.
Uh-oh.
What's your favorite investable market right now?
Well, what makes that hard is the definition of the word market. And I would, however, I think I'd have to say, even though I'm not necessarily actively involved in it myself at this point, is venture capital. Early stage venture capital. And the reason I say that is I do believe we are in the equivalent of another industrial revolution, the digital information technology revolution. And there's going to be so much that comes out of the leading edge of that innovation that I think would just be so exciting from an investment perspective. If I were young, I would be hanging all over venture capital like a cheap suit. I mean, it just is where to go. Beyond that, I would say there are areas that are more efficient and there are areas that are less efficient. I would think about those markets, emerging markets, frontier markets, things like that. There are many of them out there that are less researched, less regulated, less information, all of which, sometimes young people come in and they work and they're like, well, I'm not going to invest in that. I can't figure anything out about it. There's no information there. No, wrong answer. Answer is exactly that. There's no information that I can get there. It's really, really hard. I'm going to have to work on weekends. Oh my Lord, that's so bad for me to do. And yes, that's why you're going to go do it, because that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah, that's or as you say, with monetary policy being the dominant factor for not a short period of time, but now we're getting into longer periods of time, setting the price of assets. Yeah, so venture capital, which is not in for our students. That's not in the natural portfolio set in Brian's products or funds, but he's even going outside of there to say venture capital. And Brian, would it be fair to say, when you say that, and the idea of active being the basis of society, that is a tremendous observation, right? Active management and venture capital and private assets. I don't know if we have the time here, because I want to try and get to our audience's questions, but the idea of, I wanted to go down the path of private versus public assets, right? and yeah, we could debate this and have a lot of fun. But we got a couple people interested in this question, and that'll be the last question on investment banking field, which is not a natural for you and I, but you're a partner at an investment bank, so we'll get to that last. So the second to last question, the penultimate question, Brian, is, and this is an easy question, but the answer, you have a lot of good book recommendations. What is your favorite on, and I know this is a favorite topic of yours, what is your favorite on game theory?
Oh, let me get it for you, because I keep it right here. I thought you were going to ask my favorite of all. No, you didn't come in with that one. I would say that my favorite is a book called Strategic Thinking by Dixit and Nailbuff, Dixit, and Nailbuff, Nalebuff. And I believe that one of those, I think it was Nailbuff, was actually the founder of the company Honest Tea. So not only did he write on strategic thinking, but you can read it from an individual who is at the forefront of investing. So that I think is the one I would recommend. It's accessible too. It's you don't have to be a mathematician to understand it.
Gotcha. Still in print? Still can find a used copy, maybe?
Yes. Oh yeah, it's still in print.
Okay. 328. I don't know if we'll get to all these. There is a question on characteristics and skill sets in newly hired analysts, specifically in the investment banking field. You wanna opine on that?
Yeah, I really, whoever asked that question, thank you. I'm not going to give you an answer by any stretch of the imagination that you're expecting. But I will say something is changing in the world. And just so you know, Chris, I'm happy to answer questions if people want to hang on a little longer. So whatever, if you can, I'm okay with that. But I understand there are deadlines. Often you read something and it says, oh, I want a good communicator, excellent written skills, and blah, 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 blah. I don't want that. I don't want that. When my kids were born, 1 in 10,000 children were on the autism spectrum. Now it's closer to 1 in 100. are on the autism spectrum. If you go out and seek people who are excellent communicators, great writers, you may in fact be preventing yourself from bringing on board and associating yourself with the most valuable people you can possibly hire. And I have been so lucky to have so many wonderful people work with me who I actually probably wouldn't have hired them if I interviewed them. However, they came to me through mergers and acquisitions, and I had them. And I learned something very, very important there. So what I look for is, 1, integrity. That's a given. 2, intelligence. I hate to say it, but it's a dime a dozen. There are a lot of smart people out there, and being smart ain't going to cut it. 3, insatiable curiosity. Insatiable curiosity. Maybe Warren Buffett says, what's the most important thing to do for your career? Read, 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 read. I would say curiosity, 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 and I don't think we necessarily disagree on these things. And those are really, there are other things I don't really necessarily want to go into that I look for, but it's really that curiosity that's why some of my team have worked with me for 25 years, and we've been at what now, maybe 4 or 5 companies even. We'll move together. We are all insatiably curious. We all work hard, and we love being with each other because of that. The other thing is, last thing I'd say is, this ain't a 9-to-5 job. If you want to come in 9 to 5, great. You'll be a wonderful grunt for a number of years, and you'll stay a number of grunt for a number of other years, unless you can just be overwhelmingly productive from 9 to 5. Unfortunately, things happen on the weekend.
Okay, so I think we took care of the second to last question. What characteristics do you look for in new hires with minimal experience? Intellectual curiosity, a voracious curiosity to answer why. Why does that happen? And if it's the information is easily available and or not easily available, and somebody says, no, that's too hard to do, then that gives you a real clue. Okay, let's go to the last question. I've got 3:32. We've got a lot of students still with us, and thank you for your questions and patience. I'm gonna read this last question, and I'm cutting it off. This is the last. And let me read the question. Since complex machine learning models, such as recurrent neural networks, like you mentioned, are black box models where explaining what is behind the curtain is challenging, especially when creating investment strategies. What is your vision on how we utilize these tools to reason deductively? Now, I would like to add one thing, and it's from the Institute, and it's what CFA Institute, our friend Mark Franklin is frequently saying, Brian, and that is it's AI and HI. It's human intelligence and artificial intelligence. It's reasoning, it's critical thinking, it's deductive reasoning. One is not dominant, they're complementary, they have to go together. And that is what the Institute is thinking about and talking about, and really coming up with excellent material in the future of finance from Rebecca Fender. But let's have you answer that question about your vision on how we utilize these tools to reason deductively.
Yes. Boy, that is a really nicely complicated question in a very good way. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to give you an answer, and I wish this is not a framework that I came up with, and I wish I could remember who did it, because I'd love to give credit. Maybe somebody here knows. I try my best in terms of thinking of research with my team as dividing it up into what the person who thought up this called the wisdom hierarchy. And the wisdom hierarchy starts with facts. And I alluded to some of this as we were talking. It starts with facts. facts then are weaned out to determine what's relevant of those facts. I mean, it's nice, I want to buy Tesla, but it doesn't really matter that there are 3 ducks in the backyard here of the house in my decision making with respect to Tesla. The 3 ducks are a fact, but they're not information. The next is you've got facts, information, and then you've got knowledge. And knowledge really is the creation of mental models, the creation of models to understand what you observe. And there's not necessarily a model. If there's a model, that a model might be the discounted cash flow model. But sorry, central banks mean that that's a model, but not the only model. So knowledge then becomes the creation of models. And wisdom is the next stage. Wisdom is knowing which models to use. And I would observe that machine learning can assist in all steps of this. In identifying, it can assist in the identification of information. It can assist in the creation of models. It is going to be a while, I think, before it actually can impart wisdom to the process. But there's no doubt in my mind that it can assist in the determination of which models are more appropriate. And that's very good. But there's always something to remember, and that is machine learning, complex models, neural nets, biological programs, whatever you want to call it, any number of different ways of doing it, use data. And I've never, ever found a data point about the future. And I'm pretty darn certain that some of the most, Einstein coming up with general relativity hypothesized about gravitational waves, and we discovered them, finally detected them about 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. That was purely deductive. Now, he didn't just dream this up out of the air. There was a lot of other research that was out there, and he was able to combine these models into some way of thinking that was completely off base with everything else out there. And somebody asked him, I forget the exact question, is what would you do if you found this to be wrong or whatever? And he said, well, God had better ask himself what he got wrong, something along those lines. But the point was really not one of arrogance. The point was that the question was asked from the perspective of the old understanding of physics, of astrophysics, not the new understanding of astrophysics. And he was simply saying, this framework is right, that framework is wrong, the question is therefore invalid. That's going to be hard for machine learning and alternative intelligence to pick that one up quickly. So I would say AI assists, and it will assist more and more and more each year, but it's going to be a long time before HI disappears.
That's awesome. I like your earlier comment on predicting versus detecting. ML and big data, not predicting but detecting, right? This has been excellent, Brian. On behalf of our 5,000 members and the students today, but the society, you are always welcome to visit with us. When you have new ideas and concepts and topics you want to speak about, you are always welcome to visit with us. Thank you very much for your time. Safe travels. I'd like to thank the students who asked great questions, and the panelists, Melissa Binder, and all the advisory groups that were involved. And I must thank our staff who diligently worked behind the scenes to create this, get this done, get this executed, the production of this. It was great. It was a great event. We're glad you were here. Reminder that the CFA Institute has an upcoming event for Illinois universities that was in the slide deck. Get in touch with us at cfachicago.org if you need more information. And we're going to close it there and sign off and wish everybody safe travels and a happy and safe, fun weekend. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.